Good morning, everybody. Today's proceedings are being live streamed. Those with electronic devices may use them to transmit what they hear, but only 15 minutes after the event that they're describing. Those devices may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me? I'll take you through the affirmation. If you'd like
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Okay, if you'd like to repeat after me, please. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, clearly and sincerely
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the
whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Mr. Couch, can I first check that you can both see and hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Thank you. Could you please confirm your full name?
Michael John Couch.
Mr. Couch, you've made two witness statements to the inquiry. The first dated the 21st of September 2023 and a second supplementary statement dated the 14th of November 2023. Are the contents of those statements true and accurate to the extent of your knowledge and belief?
They are, sir.
Thank you. I'm not proposing that we call those up at this moment in time, but for the purposes of the transcript, those are MPS 0748824 and MPS 0748887. Mr. Couch, it's right, isn't it, that you were a detective sergeant in the SDS between April 1983 and July 1987?
That's correct, sir, yep.
Yes. And you say in your witness statement that you joined the Metropolitan Police in 1967 as a uniformed officer, is that right?
That's right, yes, sir.
And joined Special Branch in January 1973?
That's correct.
You say in your witness statement that you knew or were aware of the existence of the SDS before you joined, is that right?
That's right, yes, sir.
Yes. What was it about the unit that you were aware of at that time?
That they were undercover officers, providing intelligence from individuals likely to cause problems at demonstrations, and maybe provide intelligence as to extremist activity.
I think you say in your statement that during a posting on S Squad, you had sight of reporting which you had suspected emanated from the SDS. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It normally was addressed in a particular way.
And did looking at these reports, were you able to form an insight at all into the nature of the SDS from that?
Yes. Not vaguely, I suppose. But yes, I got a good idea, really, of what groups they were trying to infiltrate.
You tell us in your statement that you were approached in 1973 to join the SDS as a field officer. You tell us that that approach was made by DI, and it's an individual we're calling HN294. Just take a moment to consult your cipher key, but please don't say the name aloud once you've identified it.
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Yes. What, at that time, was explained to you about the unit and about the role you were being asked to perform?
I really can't remember exactly. It was an informal interview, I think. It just wasn't an invite to join as such. But would I consider it in the future? And at the time, I had personal difficulties at home. I was in the middle of a divorce, and it just wouldn't have been any good for my health at all.
You say in your statement, Mr. Couch, that one of the reasons that you declined the role was because you felt that undercover work wasn't for you. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
What was it at that time about undercover work that you felt wasn't for you?
I didn't think I could live a lie, I don't think, successfully.
You also tell us, I think, that you didn't want to give up your social life. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And what was it that you understood about being a field officer on the SDS that made you feel that you might have to give your social life up?
Well, I was playing a lot of rugby in those days for the Met Police and mixing with other police officers who were interested in and playing rugby for the police. And that would have been a major thing I'd have to give up, and I didn't want to do that.
And that was because the impression that you had formed was that joining the unit meant that you would have to give those sorts of things up.
Yes, sir.
Moving forward then to when you did eventually join the unit, you tell us in your statement that you joined in 1983, and this followed a call from the then DCI of the SDS, DCI Short, who offered you a role as the SDS admin sergeant. Is that right?
That's right, so yeah.
What at that time did DCI Short explain to you about the role?
Largely, there were going to be 2 sergeants in the office under his supervision with a DI, and the 2 sergeants were responsible for one, tidying and making sure the intelligence, tidying reports and making sure the intelligence was passed to our main office and to the security service at Scotland Yard, and the other in charge of the finance part of the office.
And it's right, isn't it, that at that time you were offered the particular role that was, we call the admin sergeant, but that's dealing with the reporting side of things.
It was, yes, for a year, I think.
You say in your statement that it sounded like an interesting role to you, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
What was it about the role that sounded particularly interesting?
Really, to find out more about undercover policing, I think, at the time.
So you joined in 1983 as one of 2 detective sergeants in the SDS back office.
Yeah.
The other at that time, we understand to have been at DS HN 45. Again, if you need to refresh your memory, do consult your cipher key, but please don't say the name aloud.
Yes, that's correct.
Whilst we are dealing with the composition of the unit, there is just a matter in your witness statement that I would like to clarify with you. So if that could be brought up, please. MPS 0748824. And if we could go to page 8 once that's been brought up, please. Thank you. And towards the bottom of that page, you are dealing with members of the management team during the time that you were in the unit. And actually, the bit I want to ask you about crosses over onto the following page as well. Thank you very much. So if we were to look at 34B, you talk about DCI Anthony Waite. Say, we knew him as Tony Waite. He was the DCI. And then it says succeeding DCI Malcolm MacLeod. And then at C, DCI Malcolm MacLeod, he succeeded DCI Short as DCI. Mr. Couch, my question to you is it possible that you have got the order of DCI Waite and DCI MacLeod the wrong way around in that bit of the statement?
No, I think Malcolm MacLeod was before Mr. Waite.
The evidence that the inquiry has seen suggests that DCI Waite succeeded DCI Short, and then Mr. MacLeod followed him. Is it possible that could have been the case, to your recollection?
No, I don't think so. But no, you're throwing doubt into my mind. But I'm sure Mr. MacLeod was only there very briefly, I think.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Couch. We'll move on from that. In terms of the division of labour within the back office, it's right, isn't it, that you perform the duty of the admin sergeant and the finance and expenses role. That was carried out by DSHN 45 when you joined the unit.
Yes.
And in terms of broadly what you were responsible for, you as the admin sergeant, your principal responsibility was the process of producing the intelligence reports that were being produced by the STS. Is that right?
That's correct, sir. Yep.
And the sergeant who was dealing with the financial side of things, predominantly that was managing claims for expenses,
mm-hmm.
and anything to do with the upkeep of vehicles and so on.
Yes, that's correct.
You tell us that you moved eventually from the admin sergeant role to the finance role. Would that have been when DS Chris Hyde joined the unit, replacing HN45?
That's correct, sir, yep.
Yes, we understand that to have been in around April 1985. Does that sound right to you?
I'd say it was fairly close, but I can't be sure.
Yes, so broadly speaking, you would have performed the admin role between about April 1983 and April 1985, and then when Chris Hyde joined the unit, you performed the finance role thereafter. Does that sound about right?
That's correct, sir, yeah.
As the admin sergeant, other than dealing with the reports, did the role include attending the twice-weekly meetings of the unit?
Yes, it did.
Did it include taking the daily check-in calls from undercover officers?
Yes, that would be both the sergeants generally.
Yes,
but if we were busy, then one of the senior officers would take the call. But generally, it was the sergeants.
Yes. Did it also include, from time to time, accompanying the DI or the DCI on trips outside of the Metropolitan Police District?
Occasionally, yes, it did.
You've said in your statement that the detective sergeants weren't managers and you didn't understand your role in that way. Is that right?
I think so, because a lot of the guys who were working undercover were the same rank as we were.
Yes. It follows then that you didn't consider the undercover officers reported directly to you, or you had some sort of line management supervision over them?
No.
Did you provide undercover officers with any form of operational direction or control?
If we had a request from one of the main squads within the special branch, and I would generally pass it to the senior officers, or if they weren't available, I would go direct to the undercover officer with the request. So yes.
And what, if anything, was the fact that you were not managing undercover officers? What if anything, did that mean for the dynamic of the relationships that the back office sergeants had with the undercover officers?
We were close colleagues, I suppose, really, as opposed to managing.
So does it follow then that one of the effects of not being part of the management team, as it were, or the undercover officers' bosses, was that the undercover officers maybe felt more closely associated with you?
I would say yes.
Was the relationship between you and the undercover officers less formal, perhaps, than it would have been between them and the management team?
The whole dynamic was fairly informal, but everyone knew who the governors were. But it was fairly informal and relaxed.
Would undercover officers have been more candid with you than perhaps they would have been with members of the management team?
I doubt it.
Do you ever engage in banter with the undercover officers?
Yes.
And what sort of things would that entail?
They wouldn't talk about, or didn't talk about, say wouldn't, their specific undercover work, but we would talk about anything and everything with just family, sport, working conditions, what they do socially. That sort of thing.
Would banter have included making light or making jokes at one another's expense?
Yes, but there was nothing. It was fun. There was nothing untoward.
The officer who we are calling HN25. Please, again, do consult your cipher key. Please don't say their name aloud.
Yeah.
In his evidence inquiry, said about your colleague Chris Hyde that he was probably too close to members of the field. He said he liked to be one of the chaps, one of the boys. Do you agree with that characterization of Chris Hyde?
No.
Why not?
I don't think he was. I don't think he attempted to be one of the boys. There was certainly a sense that we were the office, if you like, and the undercover officers were a different unit, totally.
HN25 also said about Chris Hyde, he felt like the rank wasn't really that important to him and that he was of a level with you. Would you agree with that characterization at all?
I don't know what rank HN25 was at the time. I thought he was a DS, I must say. And
would you agree?
Sorry.
Forgive me. No, please, Mr. Catch.
I thought he was a DS, which was the same rank as.
It's the character. Sorry, Mr. Catch.
Yeah.
The characterization, though, in general, that Chris Hyde thought he was of a level with undercover officers. Do you agree with that at all?
I'm not sure what you mean. On a level, he was the same rank as a lot of them. but and there would be banter between the two sides, if you like.
Thanks, Mr. Couch. Moving on then, did you see that there was a pastoral or welfare element to your role?
Oh, yes.
And would you say that that was a substantial element of the role that you carried out?
I think so. We'd mix occasionally on a day off. For instance, I was quite fit in those days, and I would go running or playing sport, badminton, squash with them when we finished work or before we started. And of course there was a certain element of having a drink occasionally, and we had what we would call an away day on days off very occasionally, and the whole squad would go off. For instance, we went to the races one day. The whole tribe of us went to the beach, and we had a very occasional trip to Boulogne. Just general good fun, and being back to being human, if you like, and so yes, there was a certain amount of that.
You say in your statement that if undercover officers had any worries, they could come through you and you would escalate it with the DI or DCI, is that right?
Yes.
Was this a particular assurance that you had given to undercover officers that they could come to you?
No, I don't think so. It's just that I was fairly people-friendly, and they knew they could come to me, and I would pass them to the DI or the DCI if I thought it was necessary, or if they thought it was necessary. Or they could go direct to them.
What sort of worries would they come to you with?
I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head.
What sort of things can you recall?
Well, no, I can't really. I can't remember.
The twice daily phone calls into the office, did that have a predominantly welfare purpose?
Yes.
We don't need to turn it up, but DCI Waite has said in his statement, it's at paragraph 213, that the calls to the DSs, they were to say essentially that the officers were alive and well and let you know how things were going. Would you agree with that characterisation?
Yes, I would, yep.
In your statement, you address an appraisal of you by DCI Waite where he says you are able to assist other officers when they had difficulties. How consistent is that appraisal with the welfare aspect of your role?
Well, I was a fairly experienced DS, and if they had any problems, they could come to me and I could give advice if they needed it, rather than go up to the DI and the DCI if they didn't want to.
And I suspect it follows from your evidence a moment ago, but are you able to recall any particular difficulties that officers might have come to you with?
No, not off the top of my head.
In that same appraisal, Chief Superintendent Tucker refers to your close supervision of young officers. Again, does that strike you as consistent with your role at the time?
Well, I was always there if they wanted help. Yes, I suppose, yes. For the younger DCs, and most of the DSs would be more than capable of sorting out their own problems.
Roger Pierce, when he gave evidence to the inquiry, said that the sergeants had their ears to the ground. Is that a characterisation that you would agree with?
Probably more so than the senior officers, I would imagine.
And would you say there were particular things that you might have been listening out for?
No.
Any risks to undercover officers' welfare, for example?
We had one or two problems with officers during my period there with illness.
Yeah, it's a topic I'm going to revisit in due course, Mr. Couch.
Right.
For the time being then, were there any other particular risks that you would say that you and your colleagues in the back office might have been trying to listen out for?
I think where you're going is that was never talked about, if that's the line you're talking about,
well,
relationships.
Yes. Sexual relationships between undercover officers and individuals that they were reporting on, was that something you might have been listening out for?
That was never discussed.
Again, Mr. Couch, it's a topic we're going to revisit in due course. For the time being, I'm going to move on to the question of recruitment of SDS officers to the unit. You say in your statement that the preference was for SDS officers to be in long-term relationships to provide stability at home. Being an undercover officer can be isolating, so this was for the well-being of the officers to get back to normal when they were off duty. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Where did that understanding come from?
I think Mr. Short.
You say that you didn't give any particular assurances to undercover officers joining the unit about their welfare, is that right?
Yes.
Can you recall if anybody did?
No, not off the top of my head, I can't know. But certainly I would imagine it was discussed as they were recruited.
Looking then at what you say about the preference for long-term relationships to provide stability, was the goal here to provide undercover officers with an anchor back to their real lives?
Yes.
And was that in order to prevent undercover officers from becoming too embedded in their cover identities?
Yes, it was.
Was there an understanding then that there was a real risk of that happening?
I think there was, yes.
And where did Where did that understanding come from?
I think it was generally thought by those in charge of the unit, backed up by the sergeants, that it was a difficult role that the people were asked to perform, and we should be very careful not to put too much pressure on them, and try and be aware if they're being taken over by this pressure.
Why was it that the unit placed particular stock in married partners as an anchor, as opposed to some other form of anchor to their real lives?
In what way, sir?
Was any consideration given to other anchors or positive influences that officers might have in their real lives as effectively addressing that risk that we've just spoken about?
I think we're going back that far. I can't think of any, no.
Was one of the reasons perhaps why there was stock placed in married partners as an anchor was because the unit was mindful of the risks of sexual relationships with people that undercover officers were reporting on?
I can't recall that being discussed at all. Not within the office, though.
I'm going to ask that the document be brought up, please. It's MPS 0738025. So it's in your supplementary bundle at tab 6. Mr. Couch, this is a document which concerns the officer we're calling HN88. So again, please consult your cipher key and do not say the name aloud. Mm-hmm. These are handwritten notes. Could we go to page 6, please? These are the handwritten notes of an interview with HN88 by officers from Operation Hearn in 2015. About halfway down the page there is what appears to be a subheading where the word sex is underlined.
Yeah, I've got it, yep.
Yep. And then just a couple of lines down from that, there is a note that says, single men with groups. Do you see that?
Yep, yes, sir.
Could we go over to the next page, please? And at the very top of that page, again, there's a note that says, only married people for a reason. Does it follow from that there was at least some degree of awareness within the unit of the risk of sexual relationships and as it were, the need for recruiting married officers to counter that risk?
No, I don't think so. I think it would it'd just be back to having a stable life at home, whether they're partners or married, or I don't think we knew of any sexual activity within with undercover officers and the people groups that they were infiltrating at the time.
And that can be brought down now, please. Roger Pearce, in his evidence to the inquiry, said this: the issue was the SDS inviting married men generally to live as single men for nearly half a decade, conventional men with partners living an unconventional radical life. The risks should have been raised more fully at the time. Would you agree or not with that view that he has expressed?
I think so, yeah.
What aspect of that in particular would you agree with?
it would be difficult for men if there were women within the group and they were attracted to the undercover officers. If they weren't married, they were single, they might just think that, well, I suppose why not? If the girl was keen, but
what, if any, consideration was given to the possibility that an undercover officer's marriage or partnership may not have been an anchor or positive influence in their real life?
I don't know. Certainly, my memories are that most of them had, those that were married, had decent marriages, happy marriages, which they were quite happy to talk about at the meetings we had twice a week, just informally.
Is it right then to say that the assumption was that where undercover officers were married, that would have always acted as an anchor or positive influence back to their real lives?
I don't think always, no.
Turning then to the back office, is it right that on a given day, the back office consisted of you, the other detective sergeant, and then more often than not, an undercover officer pre-deployment?
Yes, that's correct.
And the undercover officer prior to their deployment, were they in the back office for a period of approximately 6 months or so?
I think it varied, but I can't put a time on it. But that sounds not far off.
Would the DI or DCI of the unit attend the back office often?
Yes, it was an open office really, but just 2 rooms.
Yes. And forgive me, the other room being what was referred to as the front office?
Yes.
Yes. Is it right then on a given day, you would have been as admin sergeant undertaking work on the reports?
Yep.
The other detective sergeant working on expenses and other financial related issues in the unit?
Yes, correct.
What would, on a normal day, the undercover officer that was posted with you in the back office have been doing?
Well, he'd be preparing his legend, if you like, for deployment. So he would try and arrange, a vehicle for a start. We'd have to get him a vehicle, and driving license was, and then some sort of employment. Generally, they sort that out themselves with friends or people they knew from outside of the police working.
Would they have been reading intelligence reports that were being submitted to the back office?
Yes.
Assisting you and the other detective sergeant with the work you were doing on the reports and expenses?
Not so much, but yeah, occasionally.
Yes. Bob Lambert in his evidence said that he would occasionally be adding file references to some of the reports. Does that sound like something that they might have been doing?
Yes. Well, they would, if the undercover officer requested sight of a file of any sort, they would be the ones to go to Scotland Yard from where we were situated in Vincent Square there and collect it. Plus they'd bring back expenses and this sort of thing.
And I think you say in your statement that it would often be the case that that officer would be taking the draft reports over to be typed up. Is that right?
That was initially in my time, yeah.
Yes. We'll revisit that process shortly. You've said in your statement that there was no formal training for undercover officers, and that they learned from their time in the back office and from attending the weekly meetings. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So.
Does it follow then that this period that they spent with you for several months was quite a critical period in their learning and development before being deployed?
Yes.
You've said in your statement that you don't have any recollection of there being a ring binder or other loose leaf collection of documents in the back office. Is that right?
Yes, I've been asked that, and I can't recall it.
Is that you there might have been, but you don't remember, or that you don't think there was?
There might have been, but I don't remember.
How do you recall the ways in which undercover officers would learn about things such as how to create their cover identities?
Well, they would. Are we going back to the dead children side of things, or not yet?
I'm going to ask you in a moment about that particular issue. Would they, for example, the undercover officers, ask you questions about the life of an undercover officer deployed and gain some insight from you?
Not so much, because I had no experience of undercover work, apart from being in the office. So they would ask general questions, but for more detailed stuff as to how they go about joining groups and working their way into some position of authority, they get that from the guys who are out in the field already.
Can you recall on a given day the types of conversations that took place between you in the back office? Would you, for example, be talking about the deployments that were ongoing at the time and anything you'd observed in the reporting?
Yes, we could do, but with who? With in between the office staff?
Amongst yourselves, yes. So you, the other detective sergeant, and the officer who was pre-deployment.
Oh yes, we discussed that, and they would have already been asked, I think, to infiltrate a particular group.
And would those conversations include conversations about the particular individuals that were being reported on at the time?
Well, they'd see names in the reports of the people we're talking about here, and they could if they were asked to join a particular group, they could access files from Scotland Yard and read up on those, which they would have done.
We're going to move on now, Mr. Couch, to something you've touched on just a moment ago, which is the legend building process. You say in your statement that you were not involved in legend building in any way. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
But based on what we've just discussed a moment ago, is this something that you accept was going on in and around the immediate environment where you were working?
Yes.
Did you ever test undercover officers on their cover identities before they were deployed?
I don't recall doing that, no.
I'd like to bring up a document, please. MPS 0728978. It's the SDS annual report from 1986. Could we go to page 6, please? And that might be the wrong page. No, forgive me, that is the right page. We're looking at paragraph 11, please. Thank you. I'm just going to read what paragraph 11 says to you. As a first step, each officer, prior to entering the field, spends a great deal of time researching and establishing his false identity. In this respect, our gratitude must be expressed for the help and advice given by the security service. Before an officer becomes operational, his background is thoroughly checked by the administrative staff, and only if it is found to be complete in every respect will he be permitted to become operational. Does that, Mr. Couch, prompt any recollection about whether or not you were involved in testing undercover officers on their cover identities?
I don't recall doing that.
And that can be taken down now, please. Turning then to the use of undercover officers by the identities of deceased children. You've said in your witness statement that you were aware that this was the practice.
Yes.
And you've also said that in your view, the rationale was the need to use an existing name on the birth register. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Do you recall ever assisting an officer in arranging to visit the location where the deceased child whose identity they were using grew up?
No, I don't.
Do you recall ever assisting an undercover officer in conducting research into the family of the deceased child?
No.
You say in your statement, I certainly do not think the practice would have continued if there was another option. Is that right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Are you able to say whether that view was the general view that was held within the unit at the time?
I'd say no one questioned or came to me or any of the others, I don't think, that we shouldn't be doing it that way.
Forgive me.
No, go on.
Can you recall if any consideration was ever given to other options, for example, using an entirely fictional identity?
I don't think so, because that would be a lot easier to check. If you would use a totally fictional identity, it'd be quite easy to go to what was then Somerset House, I think, in our time, and then became St. Catherine's House, I think, to check the date of birth that was given, and there'd be no one there. So it would it would be a lot easier to expose the officer.
Was any consideration given to the fact that using an entirely fictional identity would address the risk of an undercover officer being presented with their death certificate?
I don't know. Not by me, but it might well have been.
Are you aware that the SDS officer, Rick Clark, was presented with his own death certificate whilst deployed?
I knew he left the unit early, but no, I didn't know that.
We're going to move on then to the topic of reporting, and we'll start just by looking at the process by which intelligence reports were produced. You say in your statement that undercover officers handed in their handwritten reports at the twice weekly meetings and would also report intelligence orally. Is that right?
That's right, yes, sir.
You've said that you or whoever the admin sergeant was at the time would take those handwritten notes away. Did you also make a note of any of that intelligence that was being reported orally at the meeting?
I didn't, I don't think, but certainly the DCI would have done, or the DI.
You've said... Forgive me.
Go on. I might well have made notes as well.
You've said in your statement that during the meeting you would try to read them, the handwritten notes, through, and if I had time during the meeting, to ascertain whether any information needed clarifying. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Can you explain what you mean by clarifying and what types of information you would ask for clarification about?
Only if the reports were written in a hurry and it didn't make sense to me, I'd have to get them to clarify what they mean. Because if I'm actually trying to put it into order and grammatically correct, I've got to be very careful that I don't change the meaning of the intelligence that's being provided.
We're going to explore in a moment those next stages of the process. I think you've also said in your statement that once you'd received that raw intelligence, you would sense check it. Is that the same as the process you were speaking about just now, which is essentially making sure that it all made sense to you?
Yes, yes.
And I'm sure it follows from what you've said, but that constituted you reading that draft report, didn't it?
It did, yes.
Yeah. You've explained that the next step, once you'd sense check the reports, would be to have it sent off to be typed up. Were there any circumstances in which you would not send the handwritten reports to be typed up?
Not that I can remember. When I initially started there, it was all the reports went to the head of the SB typing pool, the woman in charge. And it was kept solely in her power to type it up, and no one else got sight of it within the typing pool. And then it would be returned to us, and we would check it for typing errors and that sort of thing, which were very rare.
Yes. So as far as you were concerned then, when you'd got that sort of raw intelligence, there was not a decision on your part to be made about whether or not to send it off to be typed up. It would just be something that you would do.
Yes, that's correct.
You've explained just a moment ago that once that typed up report was returned to you, you would check it again for typos and grammatical errors. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And again, I'm sure it follows, but that constituted you reading the whole of the report.
Yes.
You then explained that it would be handed up to the DI or the DCI to review and to sign. Were there any circumstances in which you would not have sent that typed up report to be reviewed and signed?
No.
Can you ever recall the DI or the DCI sending that report back to you unsigned for any reason?
No.
Were there any circumstances you can think of in which the DCI or the DI would not sign the report having reviewed it?
Not that I can think of.
It's right then that after that stage, that signed report would then be disseminated, isn't that right?
Yes, that would. It would be copied to the security service, or a copy would be attached to the first report, signed off by the chief or the DI, and then it would be taken over to our squad chief, who would then disseminate as he thought necessary.
Does it follow then from what we've just gone through, that process, that nearly every handwritten report that you would receive would eventually end up being disseminated regardless of its content?
No, if a handwritten report.
Yes. What I'm getting at, Mr. Couch, is that you've explained to us that you can't recall circumstances in which the raw intelligence wouldn't be sent off to be typed up, or circumstances in which those typed up reports wouldn't be signed off and disseminated. So my question is really, does it then follow that the original intelligence would almost always end up in a report that was sent out?
Almost always, but I would. There would probably be reports that either the chief inspector or the DI would say this shouldn't go, but I can't recall off the top of my head any specific one.
Could you recall broadly the types of situations in which they might say this doesn't need to go?
No, I can't remember any that any of the senior officers said, no, this is just junk.
Turning then to the content of the reports, you say in your statement that undercover officers got very little formal training on report writing. Is that right?
No, when they first joined the branch, they would be probationers under a sergeant, and the sergeant would give them instructions on how we in Special Branch like to lay out particular reports, and that would be their informal training, I suppose, not actually a training course.
Yes, and what about training on producing SDS intelligence reporting?
Well, that would be an extension of the basic Special Branch report.
Would you say then that the period in which the undercover officer spent in the back office pre-deployment reading reports, that was essentially their main exposure to the style and tone of SDS reporting?
Yes.
Was any thought given to the risk that undercover officers would simply imitate the style and tone of that reporting that they were looking at, regardless of its usefulness or appropriateness?
I suppose it could be, but
was that sorry, Mr. Couch?
No, I don't recall any specific reports that were just gobbledygook, if you like. I mean, mostly they were pretty steady report writing.
You've said in your statement that you don't recall instructions being given to undercover officers as what to include or not to include in reporting. Is that right?
Yes.
And when you say that, is that that you just don't recall, or that you're saying that you don't believe any instructions were given?
They were probably given informally, but I don't recall, any particular instructions being given to the undercover officers.
You said that you would provide feedback only on their handwriting in the handwritten reports. Does it follow then that you wouldn't provide feedback on any other aspect of the report's writing?
No, I would suggest improvements if I thought they were necessary. But as I said earlier, when you're correcting reports, you've got to be very careful not to change any meaning whatsoever. Otherwise, and I know officers, we used to keep copies of all the reports in folders in the back office, so that if they wanted access to see what had happened to their original reports, they could read it.
And other than spelling and typographical errors, which we've covered, what other improvements would you suggest?
Only the layout, I suppose, if I thought it needed, but generally there was none.
You say in your statement, I do not recall any instances of the undercover officer report being altered in any way prior to or for the purpose of dissemination. Is that right?
Yes.
To be clear, does that include at any time before you sent the draft report off to be typed?
Yes, if I thought it shouldn't be in any intelligence shouldn't be in there, I'd speak to the officer on the telephone, one of the 2 calls they make every day, and say, "Are you sure this is correct, or you mean this?" And if they came back and said, "Yes, that's what I want to say," then I send it for typing.
Does that include once the typed up report had been received by you and before you submitted it up?
No, I would have done that before it was typed.
You've also said you don't know if anyone had authority to edit the report. But do I take from what we've discussed just a moment ago that there were opportunities for you, for example, to remove information if you discussed it with the undercover officer beforehand?
I can't recall any specific time when I did that.
But in general terms, does it follow from your evidence that it would have been possible for you to have removed information from reports if you'd agreed it with that particular? Yes.
Yes.
Would the DI or the DCI not also have authority to edit the reports in any way?
Yes, he would, or they would, should I say.
You were asked in your statement about a comment which Bob Lambert has made, which alluded to what he called a sanitization process. You say in your statement that you can't recall such a process. Is it possible that he was alluding to any process that you can recall?
No, I can't recall that.
When giving evidence to the inquiry, Lambert said that it was routine practice for managers to edit reports. Do you agree with that characterization?
No.
Were there any circumstances in which you would remove or query any information that you had considered irrelevant?
Probably, but I can't recall anything specific.
I'd like to bring up a document now, please. UCPI 19617. So it's B6 in your bundle. Mr. Couch, this is an intelligence report from the officer we're calling HN67. So again, please consult your cipher key to refresh your memory. It's a report from October 1983. I'll just give you a moment. Have you refreshed your memory as to... Thank you. So what we can see in the top right, the date of the report, 18 October 1983, and we can see at the bottom of this report that it's one that's signed by DCI Barber. It's a short report. I'd just like to quickly... Could we have a look at paragraph 2, please? It reads this: Privacy, a member of Privacy branch of the Socialist Workers' Party, is currently resident at Privacy. He is employed on a casual basis at the SWP print shop, and then it gives the address. So we're seeing their name, address, employment details. Can we bring up paragraph 3, please? It says this: he is a homosexual and is regarded in gay circles as an unstable and over-emotional partner. Just looking back at the date of this report, October 1983, this would have been when you were the admin sergeant in the unit. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, sir.
Do you have, having now looked at this report, a specific recollection of this report?
No, I don't.
But do you accept, though, that it's likely, given that you were the admin sergeant at this time, that this report probably came across your desk?
It probably did, yes.
Focusing then on paragraph 3, what was the purpose, did you think, of reporting the sexual orientation of this individual?
Well, he's unreliable.
Why do you say that?
Well, it says on the third paragraph, doesn't it? That apart from being homosexual, an over-emotional partner.
Yeah, just focusing on the first aspect, where it says he is a homosexual, what, to your mind, was the purpose of reporting that piece of intelligence about this person?
I don't know. There was none, I suppose. In today's climate, maybe there was 40 years ago, but I don't think so.
The second aspect then of this paragraph, regarded in gay circles as an unstable and over-emotional partner, that's irrelevant information, isn't it?
Well, that he's not trusted within his own party, I'd say that that was relevant.
It doesn't say any words to that effect. Would you have expected to see that if it followed that this individual was someone who was not trusted within that group?
Yes, I suppose so, yes.
This is it's very personal reporting, isn't it, about this individual?
It is, yes.
And it doesn't even read as being something that is actually first-hand intelligence.
No, I suppose not.
It's gossip, isn't it?
Yes.
There's no intelligence value in the entirety of what's being reported in paragraph 3, is there?
I'd say not.
It doesn't enable someone to assess the public order threat that is posed by this individual, does it?
No.
Or by the SWP?
No, it's gone. It's been put through, so nothing we could do about
What do you think your view would have been at the time reading this in the draft report?
Well, I can't recall reading it in the first place. But it might, I mean, Mike Barber might well have submitted that because he used to check reports as well before they were typed up. But other than that, I can't answer that with any certainty.
Do you think that this has been something that you would have spoken to someone about or challenged with the officer reporting this information?
Probably not.
Does the lack of concern about this information on the part of you or any others who were dealing with this report, is that indicative of an attitude within the unit towards reporting on the private lives of individuals?
No, I think private life of individuals would be important at that time.
Was the lack of concern by you and others who dealt with this report indicative of an attitude in the unit towards homosexual people?
No, I don't think so.
And why do you say that?
Well, I've never heard any homophobic language from anyone in the office or undercover officers whatsoever.
We're going to take that down now, please, and bring up another report, UCPI 19565. So that should be tab 1 in your supplementary bundle. This is also dated October 1983. It's a report which has been attributed to Roger Pierce. I'm not proposing to take you through all of it. It's quite lengthy. There's only just one aspect of it I want to explore with you. If we could just highlight the date just to orientate ourselves, please. 4th of October 1983. Could we please have a look at paragraph 2? On the evening of Friday the 30th September 1983, Iris Mills delivered a speech entitled Anarchism and Feminism at the Mary Ward Centre, Queen Square, WC1. About 25 persons attended, the number of bulky, impassioned feminists greatly outnumbering the small group of nervous, defensive men. The meeting attracted little anarchist interest. Again, focusing on the date of this report, it's also October 1983, so does it follow then that this is a report which is likely to have come across your desk?
It's probably, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a specific recollection of this report at all?
No, I don't know.
Just with regards to paragraph 2 and the expression bulky, impassioned feminists, Roger Pierce, in his evidence to the inquiry, accepted that there was no justification for the inclusion of that term. Would you agree?
Yes.
He also said that there was no challenge to him to the use of this phrase by his managers. Given that it appears in the final and signed version of the report, can we take that he is right about that?
Yes.
Is that lack of challenge to the inclusion of this expression indicative of an attitude in the unit towards women?
Well, it's using that sort of language, you can only say yes. But I must say, Roger was certainly had any any ill feeling towards women whatsoever, and he tended to put some sort of humour, but he thought was humour, maybe into some of his reports.
Would you have found reading phrases like this amusing?
No, it was the sort of language that maybe was used 40 years ago.
Would others reading this report have found the use of that phrase amusing?
Well, I don't know.
We can take that down now, please. Next topic, Mr. Couch, is the security service. You say in your witness statement that you didn't have any dealings with the security service. Is that right?
At that time, yes.
Would that have included attending any meetings at which they were present?
I can't recall any meetings where they were present.
Would that have included attending any debriefings by the security services of undercover officers?
Yes, that would include that, yeah.
And would that have included making or receiving phone calls from the security service?
I think at that time it was generally the DIs that had responsibility for liaising with the security service, and not just the SDS. That would be on the main branch and the main.
You say that you...
Generally sergeants and DCs wouldn't have contact with the security service in those days.
You said that you would compile copies of all of the reports to be sent to the security service. Did you ever have sight of any feedback from them?
Not that I remember.
Did you have any awareness in general of the assistance that SDS reporting provided to the security service?
Not personally, no.
Going then on to the topic of management oversight of undercover officers, we've touched already on the twice daily call, and you've said that that would invariably have come into you or the other DS in the back office. And I think you agreed with the characterization I put to you of DCI Waite, that essentially those calls constituted saying that they were alive and well and saying how things were going.
Yes, that's correct.
What would how things were going commonly include?
Well, they could have mentioned any problems whatsoever that they wanted to, regarding not just undercover policing, but if they had other problems and they wanted to talk about it, then they could.
Did the purpose of the call include ensuring that they were safe?
Yes. Oh, that was the main purpose.
Would undercover officers have informed you on those phone calls if they were staying away from their cover address?
No. They might, but not necessarily. So they could say, I'm with my undercover address tonight, or more often than not, they wouldn't.
Given that one of the purposes was ensuring that the undercover officers were safe, would you have expected them to have told you if they were staying away from their cover address?
No.
Why not?
Time. If they were unsure of where they should be, then they could easily come back and say, look, I'm not happy going to my undercover address tonight. But they didn't need our permission. It's very difficult to supervise when you can't. Well, we never visited their their home addresses, their undercover addresses. None of us.
From an oversight perspective, would you have reported back to the managers anything of concern that arose from those daily phone calls?
Yes, we were all in the same office, and they could hear us. We could all hear us talking to them. So I would say, "Oh, hello, Roger, hello, Terry," or whatever, and the DCO and the DI were just sitting at desks as we are now, this sort of size, so they could hear if there was any problems. And I would, of course, tell them if there was any problems.
And what were there particular types of problems that you would more commonly encounter on these daily phone calls?
Very, very rarely anything. They all seemed pretty happy, and we're all, I think if they had real problems, they could easily come in and talk one-to-one to the senior officers, which they did very occasionally.
Turning then to the twice weekly meetings, we've already addressed that your role at those meetings at least included collecting the reports and, if you were on the finance side, any expenses claims. You've described in your statement that a portion of that would be what you call an open meeting where the DCI discussed upcoming policing needs. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Would that include directing the tasking of particular officers at that meeting?
But yes, yeah, they wouldn't actually be directed, but there would be, if there was a big demonstration and we wanted to know about a particular group, we had officers who infiltrated that group, then they would be expected to, they wouldn't actually be told you must do this, they'll just do it. It's like an informal order, if you like. But they knew very well what was needed, and we needed to know how many people were likely to be on the demonstration from that group, what sort of troublemakers have we got, so we could report back to our C squad generally, and they could liaise with our uniform colleagues to get the correct amount of policing to cover the demonstration.
Did officers also report their intelligence orally at these open sessions? I gather from the evidence you've given earlier that that probably was the case.
Yes.
Did officers discuss individuals within their target groups at these open sessions?
No, I don't think so. They might have, but I can't really be sure on that. But they would certainly, if it wasn't in the open meeting, they could certainly tell the DCI or the DI, this is who's likely to be the troublemakers here, and they'll be with this particular group of people.
Is this likely to have been in the private one-to-ones that you've described in your statement between the officer and the DI, DCI?
I can't recall them names being in the open meeting, so yes, probably.
Were you ever privy to these private one-to-one meetings?
No.
Did you ever find out subsequently what would have been discussed at these private meetings?
No, they never came back to us.
Did you ever get a sense of the types of discussions that would have been taking place at these private one-to-one meetings?
Well, they only. I would have guessed that's all. That it was. Are you okay with your private life? And then, how are you getting on within this particular group? What sense of quality intelligence you can give?
You've described that there would often be some socialising at the safe house once the main meeting was done. Is that right?
A little bit, yes, but not an awful lot, because a lot of the undercover officers would have meetings to go to, or go to undercover flats, rooms, so they would break up. There would be the odd beer or coffee and drunk, and there'd be little groups around, just generally chit-chatting after the open meeting. And that was, yes. And then, well, a lot of them would be driving as well, so there'd be very little drink or anything taken, if any.
What sort of things would you speak about in these social parts of the safe house meetings?
We talk about anything and everything, not necessarily work. Just generally bringing them back to reality a bit, I suppose.
Would any of the discussions about work have been about the groups or individuals that they were reporting on?
No, not generally.
I think you've described in your witness statement that occasionally some of the officers would go to the pub afterwards. Is that right?
Before, probably.
Before.
Yes.
And often on those occasions, would you drink alcohol?
If we weren't driving, some would.
To excess?
No.
You've described in your witness statement that from time to time groups of you in the unit would partake in sporting activities. I think you've described squash and badminton, going for a run. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And would that just be a mixture of people from the unit, so management, back office staff, officers?
Well, Tony Waite was a great swimmer, but he would swim at lunchtime occasionally from the office, well, not from the office, but in a local swimming pool. And a small group of us would go running in Battersea Park. There was a track there, which we used. 4 or 5, I should think, of us in the group.
Yep. What was the primary purpose of undertaking these sorts of activities about building the welfare amongst the unit?
Yes, just that.
Yes, and the camaraderie?
Yes.
Was it effective at doing these things?
I think so.
Thank you, Mr. Couch. So looking at the time, I wonder whether now would be an opportune moment for our mid-morning break.
Certainly. We'll break for 15 minutes to enable the shorthand writers, the transcribers, to have a necessary rest. And you as well.
All right.
Howard.
Mr. Couch, as we resume again, can I just double check that you can both see and hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Thank you. Earlier we touched on an aspect of your role being travelling with the DI or the DCI outside of the Metropolitan Police District. You say in your statement that the purpose of that would have been to provide cover for undercover officers attending demonstrations or hunts. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, sir. And just in case there was any problems and they were arrested for any reason, we would be there to assist the local police and hopefully make good the problem.
Does it follow that managers were particularly concerned then about the risk to undercover officers of being arrested undertaking these activities?
Yes,
You've mentioned a moment ago that the purpose was to provide some degree of cover, and I think in your statement you said you would see what you could do about it. What would that be?
well, if they were arrested, that was the main purpose, or certainly if they were in some sort of disturbance, fight, and they could be hospitalised, we could assist there, or certainly if they were arrested, that was the main reason. And well, they always knew that to be on the edge of any violence at all, and be particularly careful not to get involved unless they're forced into it.
When you attended these trips outside of the Metropolitan Police District, were you ever involved in a situation where you had to take the action that you've described in connection with an officer being arrested, for example?
No.
Moving then to the topic of overtime and expenses, you said that in your statement that you didn't deal with overtime at all in respect of undercover officers. Is that right?
Yes, that would be the DCI, the DI would sign their overtime away.
Yes, and have I understood it correctly that they would authorise payments of overtime which exceeded whatever cap there was in place at the time?
Very rarely would they exceed the cap, as you say. But if there was a decent reason, then so be it.
You've said in your statement that overtime pay constitutes a significant component of what undercover officers were paid. Is that right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
How did you know this?
But it was common knowledge within the management side of things that they should try and keep their overtime down to, I can't remember exactly what, but within reason. But if they came out with a reason where, look, it's a party meeting over a weekend, I'm going to be stuck in there for 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, what am I going to do about that? In that case, I'm pretty sure that the DCI or the DI would say, okay.
The fact of overtime being a significant component, though, of their pay, how did you come to know this? Was it because it was something that was talked about in the back office, or that undercover officers?
It was talked about generally, yes.
Yeah. In what terms?
Well, informally, I suppose, but certainly I was aware of the cap, roughly what it was, and that they should keep within that, if at all possible. But as I said, I wouldn't sign it off. It would be the senior officers to sign
Do you recall the cap on overtime hours being reduced in or around November 1986?
No.
Could we pull up, please, MPS 0728977? This is the SDS annual report from 1987. Page 9, please, once that's been brought up. And paragraph 12, we can see is headed overtime restrictions. I'm not going to read all of it, but just starting from the top, it says, in line with the restrictions placed on special branches as a whole, overtime incurred by field officers was reduced on 2 occasions during the year by adjusted working patterns. Reductions from an average figure of 160 hours per month at the beginning of the year to 120 in November were achieved. However, this created severe problems in terms of morale and the security of the SDS operation, but has been met with a general degree of willingness. Do you recall any issues relating to morale as a consequence of the reduction in the cap of overtime?
I don't recall that it was reduced, but it certainly would, in my opinion, have caused morale to drop.
Did you observe any reduction in morale in the unit connected with overtime?
Only general moaning, I expect, but that's...
Can you recall if any steps were taken to manage that perceived drop in morale?
No, I don't recall it, I must say. I always thought the overtime cap was below that, but if that's fact, then, which it obviously is.
Did you ever have any, or others in the office, ever have any reason to be concerned about the number of hours that were being worked and claimed by undercover officers?
No. I thought they were doing a very dangerous and very difficult job, and they deserved everything they got.
That document can come down now. We're going to turn to the question of expenses. We've addressed already your evidence that this would have been the role predominantly of the detective sergeant responsible for financial matters. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And I think you've addressed this already, but part of their job was at the weekly meetings to take any claims for expenses from the undercover officers. Is that right?
Yes, they would, if I recall rightly, Mondays they would put claims in to me or whoever the financial sergeant was, and then they would be taken back to the office at Vincent Square, and they'd be signed off by the DI or DCI checking the books in the safe house, and then we take it back to Vincent Square, and I would write requests to our finance department and collect the money, and it would be distributed then on the Thursday. That was the general purpose.
Did you require any receipts or other evidence in support of the expenses that officers were claiming?
Certainly with regards to petrol, but with publications and subscriptions, no. That would have been very difficult for them. In fact, it'd be hopeless.
So for those types of expenses claims, they would write a note, essentially setting out the value and then what it was incurred in relation to.
Yes.
You've covered, I think, some of the expenses that were generally claimed already. You've mentioned petrol. Did that also include any repair costs to their vehicles?
Yes, I can't recall again. This is if they had the car repaired, yes, privately, they would submit the bill to me, I suppose, if I can recall, and then they would be reimbursed.
Did it include any costs incurred as a result of travelling outside of the Metropolitan Police District?
But petrol-wise,
Or any associated expenses, accommodation, and so on?
yeah, would have done, yes.
Aside from those, were there any sorts of expenses that you found were sort of generally claimed by officers?
I think with regards to food, if they were working a vast amount of overtime, they could claim a subsistence allowance, which would include meals.
Were there any circumstances in which an expense would not have been approved?
Not that I recall.
You can't recall any examples of that occurring?
No.
Was there any degree of audit or due diligence carried out on what undercover officers within the unit were claiming as expenses?
At the end of the year, a senior officer from the finance department would come over and check all our books and receipts. This is so the end of the financial year. I mean, so the end of March, and he'd come in generally the early days of April and go through the books and say yes, it's correct, or well, he never came back in my time to say they were incorrect.
Would you, bearing in mind what you've said already about receipts and other evidence, would you have been able to ascertain if an undercover officer was claiming for something that they should not have been?
Be very difficult.
Did you ever become aware or suspect that an undercover officer was claiming expenses for something they should not have been?
No.
Does the term pubs and subs mean anything to you in the context of expenses claims?
Yes, it does. Publications and subscriptions.
And what did that? What was that?
Well, they purchased a copy of the Socialist Worker and subscriptions to finance the group that they were infiltrating, and they would claim that weekly.
Turning then to the next topic, which is undercover officers having sexual relationships in their cover identities. You've said in your witness statement that you always had the impression that sexual relationships were unacceptable and not to be encouraged. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you able to say whether that impression was shared by others within the unit?
Yes, I think so.
DCI Waite, in his evidence to the inquiry, expressed that there may have been an attitude in the unit that sexual relationships were inevitable. Do you agree with that characterization?
It would be very difficult for the officers to turn down an invitation if a member of the opposite sex was keen, I suppose. So, but it certainly wasn't encouraged, and sorry, go on, sir.
Why do you say it would have been very difficult for them to have turned down the invitation, as you say?
It would make, if the guys and the girls were keen on each other and happy together, to turn it down might turn the woman, as it was then, against
for once a short 10 minutes. There will be no disclosure or publication made of information stated during the hearing today between 12:17 and 12:19, both times inclusive.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Couch, we're going to turn to another topic now, which is SDS undercover officers committing criminal offences in their cover ID. You say in your witness statement you were not made aware of any undercover officers committing a criminal offence whilst undercover, is that right?
Yes, correct, sir, yeah.
And you also say that you were not made aware of any undercover officers being arrested or summoned in their cover identities, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to bring up, please, MPS 0526786, so it's your bundle B7. This is a report from September 1984 concerning the arrest of the individual we are calling HN19. Please consult your cipher key and do not say the name aloud.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Well, now that's been brought up, could we turn to page 3, please? We only need to really focus on paragraph 2 just to get a sense of what this is about. On Tuesday the 11th of September 1984 at 9:45 p.m. at the Elephant and Castle Pedestrian Precinct SE1, while promoting the activities of the Revolutionary Communist Party, the following person was arrested for illegal bill posting contrary to section 5410 Metropolitan Police Act 1839 that provides the name Shearing Stephen Malcolm Thomas, which is HN19's cover identity, date of birth, address and occupation. Can you see that there?
Yes, sir.
Reflecting then on the date, September 1984, does it follow that this was a report which would have come across your desk?
I don't recall it, but it might well have done.
Yeah, is it likely that it might have done, bearing in mind the date of it?
Bearing in mind the date, 1984. Yes, it could have done, but I don't recall it.
Yeah. Is it likely, though, that you were therefore probably aware of HN19's arrest at this time?
I don't remember.
Might you have been aware at the time, though?
No, I don't think so.
If we could just zoom out for a second, please, and go to the very top where there is a handwritten annotation. Can you see there at the top, there's a handwritten annotation that says, place a copy on the arrests file, and it's signed by DCI Waite. Can you see that there?
Yeah, I can see that, so yeah.
Would that have been a direction to you?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall what the reference to the arrests file might have been?
No, I don't recall.
Might it have been a file concerning the arrests of undercover officers, for example?
That's what I assume it means, but I don't recall
Would
having an arrest file in the back office.
Would the existence of such a file imply that the arrests of undercover officers were both known about and common within the unit?
No.
Why do you say that?
Well, I didn't know about it.
We can take that down now, please. You say in your statement that you weren't aware of undercover officers ever appearing as a defendant or witness in criminal proceedings. Is that right?
That's right, so yeah.
I'm just going to bring up two sections from HN19's witness statement. Again, this was the officer we were just speaking about. Again, just refresh your memory, but please don't say the name. The reference is MPS 0747710. And we'll turn to page 68, please. Paragraph 173. At this paragraph, HN 19 says this: I did witness violence to people or property whilst serving undercover with the SDS. I'm not sure there were so many examples. I saw bricks thrown at the window of a coach travelling to a conference in Leicester as the right wing got wind of it. Could we then please go to page 73, please? Paragraph 192, where it says this: I did not provide any evidence for use in any prosecution arising from my undercover deployment. The office was careful to avoid a suggestion that that might happen. In the coach incident I've described above, I observed the identity of the person who threw the brick and I included their name in my report. The office edited it out. At some point it arose in discussion and Detective Inspector Couch told me it had been edited out. No words or explanation were offered and I accepted it had been edited out. Bearing in mind what has been said there, first of all, do you have any particular recollection of speaking to HN 19 about removing names from any of his reporting to this effect?
No. For a start, I'm not a detective. I was not a detective inspector.
Is it possible that he could have been confusing you with somebody else?
It's possible, but I don't recall that at all.
Given your role at the time, which was still as the admin sergeant, is it possible that you might have provided him an explanation of why that information was excluded from the final version of his report?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have removed it.
No, but might you have explained to him, as he says here, it's where it says, Couch told me it had been edited out, no words or explanation were offered, and I accepted it had been edited out. So whether or not it was your decision, might you have just explained that to him?
It could have happened, but it would have been edited out by one of the senior officers. On the grounds, I would assume that it was a minor event, and if he ended up giving evidence at court, it could blow his cover. But other than that, I have no idea. Was it common for the SDS at this time to have edited information out in order to prevent undercover officer intelligence being used as part of a prosecution? No, not that I knew of. Next topic then, Mr. Couch, is welfare. We've addressed already some of the aspects of welfare support that you say were intrinsic to your role, the daily calls, making yourself available to the undercover officers and so on. Aside from those, what other ways did the unit seek to safeguard the welfare of undercover officers?
Well, apart from the weekly meetings and the phone calls, they all had access to the Met Police welfare system, if they so desired.
And that was something that existed outside of the SDS, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
They would be civilian staff, Yes, civilian staff.
You've referred in your statement to the fact that a Christmas dinner would sometimes be organised for members of the unit, which would also be attended by partners, family members of undercover officers. Is that right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Would you have met and socialised with the partners and family members?
Yes, well, I would have been there with my wife, yes.
You've said in your statement, in retrospect, I believe there should have been more processes in place to safeguard the welfare of UCOs, as their role of assuming a cover identity for a prolonged period of time was a difficult one. Do you recall saying that?
Who this is?
It is in your statement, Mr. Couch.
Oh, in my statement.
Would you like me to read the passage back to you?
Oh no, this is.
Sorry, yes, the document can come down now. That's my mistake.
No.
I'm just going to read aloud to you something you've said in your statement. It's about welfare.
Okay.
You say, in retrospect, I believe there should have been more processes in place to safeguard the welfare of UCOs, as their role of assuming a cover identity for a prolonged period of time was a difficult one.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, what led you to say that?
Well, you can never get too much care when you're doing a difficult job that they were doing. So any more assistance they could be given should have been considered, perhaps.
The implication from that bit of your statement is perhaps that you felt that the welfare provision wasn't sufficient. Is that a fair characterisation of that?
Well, it was a different world, I suppose, then. You just got on with it. There wasn't the huge backup that they've got these days.
HN12, please consult your key and don't say the name aloud.
Yes.
You address HN12 in your witness statement. You say that you were aware that he had a nervous breakdown and a drink-related health problem. In his witness statement to the inquiry, we don't need to turn it up, but it's at paragraphs 20 and 22 of UCPI 29190. In that statement, he attributes his heavy drinking and alcohol addiction to high levels of stress he experienced whilst deployed. You say in your statement that he never discussed these issues with you, is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Whether or not he discussed them directly with you, did you have reason to believe or suspect that he may have had an alcohol-related health problem?
Not that I witnessed, no. But he was in a very stressful group.
Did you ever have reason to believe or suspect that his welfare might have been at risk?
It wasn't obvious.
We're going to turn up another document now, please. MPS 0726910. So it's your supplementary bundle, tab 2. And we'll go to page 5, please, of that document. This is a report from September 1984 in which HN12 is reporting that he has fallen under suspicion from members of his group as possibly being a police informer. That's a summary of the report. I'm only going to draw out the relevant bits. If we could highlight, please, paragraph 4. Where it reads, the allegations against me as given by privacy are as follows. And then Roman numeral 4, it says, it was considered that I drank too much as other members had smelled alcohol on my breath when I arrived for meetings. Since I am employed as a van driver, they felt that this made me liable to blackmail or coercion by the police. First of all, do you have any recollection of these allegations being made to HN12 by members of his target group?
No, I don't.
Would these allegations from his group, as reported here, have given rise to any concerns within the unit about HN12's drinking?
Yes. Sorry, go on.
What concerns would they have been?
drink driving for a start.
Do I take it from your evidence you don't have a specific recollection of this being an issue within the unit?
No, I don't.
If we can scroll up, please, to the same document, it's page 3. This, we don't need to read all of it, but just to summarise it, it's a memo from DCI Waite about this particular incident, so HN12 being confronted. It sets out some of the steps that are being taken by the unit. I'm particularly interested, please, in paragraph 4, if we could blow that up. It says this: the security arrangements which have been made of necessity conflict with the needs of the officer himself. He is under some pressure, feeling unreasonably that he has failed. He is in need of support, and this is being provided by meeting with individual SDS officers, mainly from the office, on a daily basis. It is hoped by this means to help him over the difficult period which he is going through. The reference to individual SDS officers, mainly from the office, is that a reference to you and Detective Sergeant HM45?
No, I don't think so.
Who might that have been a reference to, bearing in mind it refers to SDS officers mainly from the office, without giving specific names, but who...
I don't think it was addressed to me, because I don't recall. I knew he had problems, but I don't recall going to see him on a daily basis at all.
Does it seem possible from this section that I've just read to you that you and or DSHM 45 may have been providing support and assistance to him?
I don't recall it at all.
Okay.
But
we can take that document down now, please. The officer Stefan Scutt,
yes,
joined the unit in or around October 1985. Did you have a view of Stefan Scutt as a person?
no, I liked him. I thought he was a good officer.
What about as an undercover officer?
I thought he did well. Initially, anyway. I can't remember the date you said, I'm sorry, but I think I left not long after he joined.
We understand to have joined in October 1985, so there would have been, on our understanding, some crossover between the two of you.
Yeah, there was, yeah.
DCI Waite, in his witness statement, described Scutt as secretive and enigmatic. Would you agree with that characterisation at all?
Secretive, certainly. What do you mean by enigmatic?
Well, let's focus on secretive for the time being. What leads you to agree with that description of him?
He was very careful about talking about his private life.
It's right, as I think we've touched on, that Scutt left the SDS after you had already left the unit.
Yes.
Do you recall hearing anything at the time about the circumstances in which Stefan Scutt left the SDS?
No, I don't recall that. But I understood there was problems with, well, I was told vetting problems, but I don't know anything other than that.
Okay. Well, we'll move on then to another topic. This is actually the final topic that I want to go through with you today. It's Operation Sparkler. This is a reference to the investigation into the placing of incendiary devices in branches of Debenhams in July 1987.
Yeah.
You've dealt with this in your main statement, but also in your shorter supplementary statement that you gave us.
Yes, sir.
You tell us that you left the SDS in July 1987.
Yeah. Yes, I've not got documentation here, but if it's on the record there, yes.
And by the 12th of July 1987, you certainly had left the SDS. That's your recollection, isn't it?
Yes.
So does it follow then that the placing of the incendiary devices can only have happened quite a short time after you left the unit?
Yes.
Just rewinding very briefly to look at Bob Lambert specifically in this context. He joined the unit in September 1983. So it follows then that he was in the back office pre-deployment when you were there. That's right, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
Do you recall that he had an extended period in the back office than as compared to other undercover officers?
No, I don't recall that.
Regardless, Bob Lambert would have spent a significant degree of time with you in the back office preparing for his deployment.
Yes, he would.
What was your view of Lambert the man?
I thought he was a decent guy. A good cop. And quite a successful undercover officer.
You liked him?
I liked him, yeah.
Would you describe him as sociable?
Yes.
What about charismatic?
Yes. Yeah. I think he was a popular all-round and a very keen and a good officer.
You, touching on Lambert as an officer, do you recall describing him as a very good police officer and very productive?
I don't recall saying that, but I would agree with that, yes.
We'll turn it up anyway. It's MPS 0737162, so that's your B21. We'll go to page 3, please. So these are the notes of an interview that you gave to officers from Operation Sparkler. And it's about halfway. It's the small paragraph about halfway down towards two-thirds. That's the one, yeah. It says here, HN32 says they were friendly with HN10 at the time, but not socially. HN32 states HN10 was a very good police officer and was very productive, however, could not be specific around any information relating to the ALF. Would you say that that is a fair characterisation of what you would have told the officers from Operation Sparkler at the time?
Yes, I'd say so.
Very productive. In what sense would you say?
He provided a lot of good intelligence with regards to the Animal Liberation Front.
And was productive, did that more relate to the volume of intelligence that he was providing or your assessment of the quality of that intelligence?
Both.
Both. That can come down now, please. We'll go forward then in time to the weeks leading up to the 12th of July 1987. So in this period, you were still a member of the unit. You would not, we understand, have been the admin sergeant at this time. Regardless of that, did you have any insight into the volume or frequency of reporting that Lambert was providing in those weeks leading up to July 1987?
Well, I would have known how much work was coming through, yes.
And what's your recollection of how much?
Oh, I can't remember that.
Do you have any recollection of the contact that Lambert was having over the telephone with members of the office at that time?
No.
Could you recall whether it was more or less frequent than normal?
No, I can't remember that.
And in terms of the intelligence that he was reporting at the weekly meetings, any insight into whether there was a greater volume or frequency of that intelligence reporting during that period?
No.
Do you recall anything about the frequency with which Lambert was having one-to-one meetings with managers during this period?
No, sorry.
We'll go forward again in time, now to September 1987. You say in your witness statement that at this time you were in E Squad. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And you were providing cover for anti-terrorist branch. You say this was for a particular officer. Please don't name them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did, yeah.
You describe your role at the time as being a liaison between anti-terrorist branch and special branch. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And you describe that as entailing the passing of relevant information between anti-terror branch and special branch.
Yes. Well, I was there. There was in those days what we call an SB cell within the workings of the anti-terrorist branch, which, when I was serving there in 1980s to 83, consisted of 4 officers, 2 or 3 sergeants and a DC, and then we had an inspector down there and a chief inspector.
Okay. In your witness statement, you've described that then DCI, Eric Docker, comes into your office and says to you that Lambert's cover flat needs to be searched.
No, he didn't come into the office. He phoned me.
He phones you, forgive me.
Yeah.
Would this have been shortly before the search on September the 9th?
Yes.
Days?
I don't know the date of the search, but of Bob's flat, undercover flat.
Yes.
Yes.
Would this been a matter of days before the search was carried out?
Oh, probably less than that.
Less than that even, possibly even the day before?
Could have been, but I'm not sure.
You say that during the course of that conversation you can't recall if Eric Docker mentioned to you the incendiary device attacks. Is it likely that he did?
Yes.
You also say that it was explained that the search needed to be carried out to protect Lambert's cover. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And that was because the homes of the activists he had targeted were also due to be searched at the same time.
That's correct, sir.
Did you conclude from this information that Lambert must have been, in the eyes of those he was targeting, a credible suspect for the placing of the incendiary devices?
No, certainly not.
Why would you not have formed that view?
Because he was a serving police officer. And why would he risk his freedom, for goodness sake?
Forgive me, Mr. Couch. My question was more directed at whether or not, given that the purpose of the search was to protect his cover, would it have followed that it was considered that those he was targeting may have felt that he was perceived by the police as a credible suspect?
Oh, sorry, yes. Yes, he would.
You say that your role in that search was to act as a welfare officer. What was the purpose of that role?
Well, I knew Bob obviously from the SDS days, and we were quite friendly. And it would have been like some sort of comfort blanket, if you like, because the other officers involved in the search were anti-terrorist branch officers. Well, the so-called search, it wasn't a search as such.
You call it a comfort blanket. What was the perceived risk to Lambert's welfare during the course of this search?
No, not that. He wasn't going to be arrested or anything like that.
So why then was there a need for a welfare officer?
Well, Mr. Docker asked me to go along as it was I was a friendly face.
And what was the benefit of this particular person being someone that was known to Bob Lambert?
Just as I've said, that he wouldn't feel intimidated.
Why would he have need to feel intimidated?
He looked intimidated to me when we were searching.
Well, we'll come on to the search now, Mr. Couch. You've said that all of the officers who attended the search were aware of Lambert's role as an undercover officer. Is that right?
Yes, right, yeah.
So it follows then that all of the officers who attended understood that the purpose was to conduct effectively a fake search of his flat.
Yes.
You describe that the door was broken in.
Yes, it was.
And on entering the flat, Lambert was sat down. He was himself sat down. He was told by the DI leading the search that his flat was going to be searched to look for evidence related to his involvement in the attacks. Is that right?
That's right.
And your evidence was that because of the DI understood what the true purpose of the search was, this was essentially done for appearance's sake.
Yes.
You say that Lambert didn't respond to what the DI said to him.
No, he didn't.
In fact, you say that you don't recall him saying anything throughout the duration of the search. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you did give some evidence a moment ago about his demeanour. Just returning to that, can you elaborate a little bit on his presentation?
He looked to me to be in shock. But whether he was or not, I don't know. But he obviously knew that his flat was going to be searched.
Given that your role was as a welfare officer, did you consider whether any steps needed to be taken by you, having perceived that he was in a state of shock?
No.
Why not?
Well, he knew we were all police officers, and he knew deep down that nothing was going to happen. And he was obviously, I would have thought, concerned that the guys he gave information on were going to be arrested, and he was not. And how are you going to explain that? But I don't know that for a fact. It's just my impression.
You describe in your statement that a search was conducted, but it was cursory in nature. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And that was because the purpose of the search was not to actually look for any evidence, but to appear as if you were.
Yes.
And again, the same goes for the breaking down of the door and the DI speaking to Lambert. That was all done for the sake of appearances.
Yes.
You say in your statement that was done in case somebody turned up. Somebody being someone that one of the activists that Bob Lambert was targeting.
Well, not the other two guys that were searched, but yes, someone. We weren't briefed as to how many others were in the group.
Yes. Did anyone, in fact, turn up?
No, not that I know.
Just returning to you being there as someone who was known to Lambert, if the purpose of conducting the fake search was so that it would look real to anybody who turned up, was any thought given to the fact that having someone present from the police who was known to Lambert might have increased the risk to him?
No, I don't think so. Well, how would they have known?
Well, my question is whether or not any consideration given just simply to the fact of someone being known to Lambert being present could have materially increased the risk to him.
I would say no.
And was that because you say in your statement that you didn't actually interact with him at any time?
No, I mean, all the officers involved in the search knew he was a police officer.
And just to drill down on the question of interacting with him, does that include that includes, I assume, any words that you might have exchanged with him?
I didn't exchange any words with him.
Any gestures that you might have exchanged? No. Knowing glances?
No.
You say in your statement, I think, that he did not, in fact, interact with anyone.
That's correct.
You tell us that nothing was seized from the search. Is that right?
Not that I know of.
Is that because you weren't looking for anything, because you didn't find anything that would constitute evidence, or because you had made a decision not to seize anything?
All three.
If you weren't looking for anything, was any consideration given to the risk of this approach?
Well, the whole idea, as we said earlier on, was if someone from his group turned up, they would see police, well, they weren't marked as uniform police cars, but there would be CID cars, if you like, parked outside his place. And there would be, I don't know how many of us, between 6 and 8 officers in his flat.
My question is around whether or not any thought was given to the risk that if you weren't searching for anything, those who had subsequently known that his flat had been searched might have been suspicious if they came across something that they thought ought to or might have been seized.
No, there was...
I'm going to ask a document be brought up, please. It's MPS 0727514. So it's in your supplementary bundle tab 3. And we'll go to page 6, please. These are the notes of an interview in 2013 between Eric Docker and officers from Operation Sparkler. If we could scroll down slightly, please. And sorry, zoom out again, please. I think I might have pulled up the wrong reference there, but it really relates to this same topic, which is about whether or not he refers in this interview, I believe, to packets of cigarettes that were present in Bob Lambert's flat that were of a similar style to those used to construct incendiary devices. Does that prompt any recollection from you?
No.
You are aware, I believe, because you address it in your statement, that Lambert says that during the search he observed you picking up a photograph of him and Belinda Harvey together. Do you recall doing so?
I don't remember that at all.
Is it possible that you did?
No.
Why do you say that?
Because I didn't.
Lambert said that that photograph may have been on a bedside table or windowsill. Does that prompt any recollection from you?
No.
Do you recall any other member of the search team picking up a photograph?
I don't recall, but they might have.
Yes, it's possible then that someone may have picked the photograph up.
Yes.
Turning then to you reporting back to Eric Docker, you said that you don't recall doing it, but you're sure that you would have done. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
You said that you would have reported on how Bob Lambert seemed. Would that have included reporting to him your evidence that he seemed shocked?
I would imagine so, yes.
And can you recall how Eric Docker would have responded to that?
No, I don't. I don't remember the phone call, but I would have most likely have made it. That's for sure.
Would you have reported any other aspect of the search?
No, only that we left him in good health and everything went well.
Do you recall any particular questions in that conversation from Eric Docker?
No.
Can you recall whether he was satisfied with the outcome?
As far as I'm aware, he was.
Were you on any subsequent occasion involved in any search of premises that were connected with Bob Lambert?
No.
Mr. Couch, thank you. Those are my questions for you. This concludes your portion of the evidence. So given the time, I assume we take the lunch break now.
Yes, and the Rule 10 exercise can be conducted over the lunch break.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. We'll break for an hour. Questions may be asked of you when we come back after lunch, but your evidence is almost at an end, if not actually at an end.
Okay, sir.